very unpopular guy, Nobel Prize, no matter, in the United States, the NAACP and the Urban League also come down very hard. Not against the war, but against the anti-war people. They thought that the anti-war movement robbed the civil rights movement of energy and unity. And even Bayard Rustin, a great organizer, someone who came up through pacifism and one of the leading architects of the civil rights movement, was really not favorable to Martin Luther King's condemnation of the Vietnam War. As Rustin said in 1968 in his endorsement of Hubert Humphrey for president, quote, "The choice is clear. It would be a national tragedy if these assets," meaning Humphrey and the Democrats, "were lost to us because of the divisions among progressive forces over Vietnam, especially when the alternative is a Republican solution in Southeast Asia. The war in Vietnam will end before long, but our problems at home will haunt us for generations if we do not act now." And not just people from the more conservative wing of the civil rights movement, but also the labor movement. The American working class is deeply divided over the Vietnam War. The hard hats who rioted in New York are a famous example of pro-war sentiment, but they hardly represent the entire feeling of working class reaction to the war. But it has to be said that the AFLCIO in many ways acted like a grassroots organizing pro-war institution that is just unavoidable. And looking at, again, further at other examples, there's always opportunities for money, prestige, travel to international conferences, in signing on to the latest imperial project. You look at the way many American socialists move on to become Reagan Democrats. For instance, Carl Gershman, who later went on to become head of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, a leading neocon group. Bayard Rustin himself becomes kind of a Reagan Democrat and ardent Cold Warrior, all in thinking that this can help protect domestic reforms at home. Social imperialism is a term that you find in the Marxist historiography of Germany and in other countries too, in looking at Germany's role in 2 world wars. It's also an idea in the writing of seminal historian William Appleman Williams, who saw the frontier, whether with the Modoc Indians or Sioux nations in the North American West or the Caribbean or the Pacific, as an outlet for American energies that can only be resolved not through so much the progressive reforms at home, but only through imperial expansion. Not only that, but military service and imperial glory has long been a way of achieving equality for people who sign on to these projects, demonstrating worthiness and patriotism to more powerful actors in society. You see this in the LGBT equality movement, or feminism, that it's big progress that women can now serve combat roles, can be bomber pilots. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, wrong about so many things, wrote in 1965 that acquiring a reputation for military valor is one of the oldest known routes to social equality, and he was talking about how this would be a way for Black America to fully integrate and get its place at the table in the United States. Complicating this further is that the U.S. Army truly has been ahead of the curve in American institutional life as a racially egalitarian institution. There's reason for people to feel some buy-in there. And added to this resentment directed at anti-imperialist and national security reformers that's very palpable. For instance, David Simon, the auteur of the Wire TV series and an expert on Baltimore's policing and a real critic of the kind of harsh over-policing and police state tactics that have come back to really bite Martin O'Malley, the mayor, yes. And David Simon has been quite upset about all the attention this Edward Snowden character and NSA mass surveillance has been getting. I mean, hasn't he, David Simon, been writing about surveillance at the more local, more prosaic level for years? Why weren't people paying attention? And now people are getting upset about, Edward Snowden. I mean, or Imani Gandhi, a blogger very close to the Democratic Party and with the wide readership, who said she cares much more about reproductive freedom than drone strikes, although she put it much more anatomically. So why this resentment? I think it's very understandable in a way, and I don't want to sit in too harsh judgment. I think it's easy to see where this comes from. Think about what internationalist reformers and national security reform efforts might look like to domestic reformers and people really in the trenches and trying to fix our mess of everyday crisis criminal justice system. I mean, the ACLU at its worst has very florid rhetoric about places like Abu Ghraib and Bagram and Guantanamo being horrible deviations from American values. Are they really? Are they really? I mean, indefinite detention is an important legal principle, and it's important to note that in Obama's plan announced today to close Guantanamo, he's preserving indefinite detention. That's really not closing Guantanamo, it's just moving it and renaming it. But even with that important distinction, there are so many continuities between places like Abu Ghraib and our domestic hellish prisons. And it's important to note that Charles Grainer, one of the main ringleader of the abuse at Abu Ghraib, learned his trade at U.S. prisons that had big scandals of mistreatment and torture, and he was implicated but not convicted in the end. But he took his trade down great. It's really a continuation. The time I went to Guantanamo to cover the pretrial action of a 15-year-old Canadian national, Omar Khadr, thought it was very noteworthy that one of his torturers, who was being questioned, said that he had threatened Omar Khadr while he was at Guantanamo with shrapnel on his back and in a bad way, that if he didn't comply and tell people everything he knew, that Omar Khadr would be sent to an American prison where he might likely be raped. Think about that for a moment, that the threat to someone, a prisoner at Guantanamo, the supposed aberration of American values, is that we're going to send you to an American prison where things are even worse. So it's a bit sick-making, I think, to pretend that these are just, oh, we're shocked, we can't believe this is happening. And when the phrase, oh, the gloves came off after 9/11, I think a lot of people who'd been paying attention were very surprised to know that the gloves had ever been on in the first place, especially for working class, Black, and Latino America. And this shows a kind of elite obliviousness to the everyday crisis in our American criminal justice system. Reminded of the character from Charles Dickens' masterpiece, Bleak House, Mrs. Jellyby. Anyone seen this on TV? I haven't watched it on TV, read it. Mrs. Jellyby's a minor character who's very much consumed with her high-minded efforts for improvement projects in the fictitious African colony of Boriobulaga as her own household goes to hell around her. And she's conscripted her daughter as an amanuensis, her husband is on the brink of suicide, and she's kind of a symbol of this conception with issues abroad while there are big crises at home. And this resentment of the attention and sympathy that people in Guantanamo get and foreigners in general get is related to the spectacularly ignorant resentment of foreign aid that we have in the United States. Americans, by and large, widely overestimate